Larry, Darlene's having a hard time getting on.
We are live.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manzi. I would like to call to order the April 13th meeting of the Norwalk Common Council. If you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, if you would please read the announcement and call the roll.
I have no announcement. Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Ms. Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Langella,
Present.
Mr. Sacchinelli,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Huvelman,
Present.
Mr. Roberts, Ms. Revulis,
Present.
Ms. Young,
Here.
Mr. Kites,
Here.
Mr. Theodorides,
Here.
Mr. Keegan.
Here.
Mr. Sirenides,
Here.
Mr. Livingston,
Here.
Ms. Shanahan. Here. Did Mr. Roberts come in at some point? No? Okay. 14 present, Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of March 23rd, 2021. Do I have a motion? Mr. Burnett makes the motion. Are there any corrections, deletions, omissions, additions that anybody wishes to put forth? Mr. Burnett.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I did see one correction on page 6 of the minutes. Under the, it says Mr. Kevin Ayala, Director of Real Estate Development. His title is Director of Economic Development, not Real Estate Development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further corrections? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as corrected? Any opposition?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Mr. Manzi, do we have anybody wishing to speak?
I don't see anyone, but if anyone would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now and I will unmute you. And please state your name and address for the record. I do not see anyone. Mayor Rilling.
Thank you, Mr. Manzi. Ms. King, do we have any correspondence that you've received?
I have none.
You have none. Does any council person have any correspondence from a constituent that they feel should be read into the record? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to resignations and appointments. We have no resignations. We do have one appointment, Jordan Hensley to the Historical Commission. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hoovelman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move Mr. Jordan Hensley for appointment to the Historical Commission. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jordan through our work together with District A of the Democratic Town Committee. And Jordan has a passion for library science, and he's currently earning a master's in that field. But his first love and course of study was in history. He's dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and understanding of where we come from, and I think that will make him a wonderful addition on the Historical Commission. I urge all of us to vote for his appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Hoovelman. Any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of appointing Mr. Hensley to the Historical Commission? Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, we are, up. It was unanimous. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is mayor's remarks. Excuse me. So first, I would like to wish our Muslim friends a very peaceful Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak. And hope that you have a spirit-filled time of worship. So thank you for all that you do for our community. Next, first, most people have probably heard that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been, the CDC and the DPH Connecticut has halted the administration of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine due to some reactions that apparently 6 or 7 people have experienced. And in all fairness, out of the 7 million vaccines of 7 million Johnson & Johnson vaccines that have been administered nationwide, but rather than continue administering the Johnson & Johnson in Norwalk, I have ordered that it be paused in the same as the CDC and DPH have recommended until this issue is cleared up to a degree that we feel safe again. So we will continue to administer the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. So anybody that wishes to sign up, I know that we still have some appointments coming up. We'll continue to have our vaccine clinics and continue to find different ways to bring the vaccine out into the community through clinics located around the city, as well as the Federal Emergency Management van that we will be having access to and sending that throughout the city. Next. This past weekend, and I want to thank Mr. Hoovelman was there. I want to thank the River Rowing Club, the Keep Norwalk Beautiful, Keep America Beautiful, and Orca for cleaning up along the Norwalk riverbanks. We picked up 4,500 pounds of trash and garbage and plastic. And the sad thing is, and it's very, very sad, is that we did this same thing just about a year ago. And in that 1 year's time, 4,500 pounds of garbage has been accumulated along our riverbanks. That's harmful to our environment, certainly harmful to our waterways. And we need to do all we can to encourage people to please keep proper trash receptacles in their vehicles, in their boats, and please don't throw trash on our streets and sidewalks. Next, this coming Saturday, we are having the mayor's annual cleanup. We will be, if you can find the information on our website, but we will be adding more information as we go along. People will be assigned to different parts of the town and helping to clean up. Normally, we end up with upwards of 150 people that participate. And it's really heartening to see so many people getting involved in wanting to help keep Norwalk beautiful. We have a really great and beautiful town here, and we want to do everything we can to keep it that way and to protect our environment. So anybody that wishes to come out on Saturday, please feel free to be out there, and we will go through different parts of town and clean up our streets. That is all I have, and I will now turn the floor over to Mr. Sacchinelli, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll move right forward to the consent calendar tonight, which is going to be read by Mr. David Huvelman. Mr. David Huvelman, it's all yours.
We have reappointments,
We have
Mr. Sacchinelli?
To the Ethics Committee.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, we do have some reappointments tonight. Who would anyone like to move those? Mr. Kites.
Thank you. I'm going to just move the regular member as the other two are alternates, and just quickly say I've known Michael Church for some time now, and I know he served just not only as a regular member but also as the chairperson of the Board of Ethics, and I think that experience is invaluable. So I appreciate his time that he served and his willingness to continue to serve.
Would anybody else like to speak on these? Mr. Keegan. You're muted.
You're muted, Tom.
I'd like to move the other two names, if I may, as alternates to the Ethics Commission. Ms. Eichner and Ms. Toronto, although I don't know either of them. I'm looking at their resumes and they speak for themselves, and I'm sure they will continue to do fine work on our Ethics Commission.
Mr. Livingston.
Thank you. I just want to add to that. I've worked with both Ms. Eichner and with Mr. Toronto and Axel, as well as Mr. Church, over the last couple of years as we've worked through the latest revision to the ethics code. And I know they've all worked very hard. I've known Nora for a number of years. I've always been very impressed with her intelligence, her thoughtfulness, and her desire to give back to the community. Also, I don't know Lori personally, but as I said, I've worked with her and the other members of the board, and I've been very impressed with her dedication and work ethic. And I think all of these employments are going to be really important as we move forward, because with the new code, they will be addressing the rollout of this to all of the city employees. So it's a very important job, and I think we have the right people to do it. So I support all three. Thank you.
They are a regular and alternates. Can we move these as a slate procedurally? I think there's a motion for all three names. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The answer is
a
yes.
Thank you. So there's a motion for all three names on the table. Can we do a show of hands vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, it's unanimous. Congratulations, everyone. I'm not muted, so the clap actually kind of comes through. Everyone, we usually do that. With that, we'll move forward to the consent calendar, which this evening is going to be read by Mr. David Huvelman.
Thank you, President Sachinelli. Number 7, Common Council Committees. 7A, Health and Public Safety Committee. 7A1A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents necessary to accept funding from the Justice Education Foundation, Inc. under FY20 Project Safe Neighborhood Grant Award in the amount of $5,000. 7A1B, authorize Chief Thomas Kohalik to execute any and all documents necessary to implement FY20 Project Safe Neighborhood Grant Award. 7A2, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a lease with the Second Taxing District for the purpose of installing and maintaining radio communication antenna and equipment on their existing tower for an initial term of 5 years with 5 successive 5-year renewal periods. 7C, Public Works Committee. 7C1, technical correction of the Common Council action of September 8th, 2020, items 7A6 to add accounts designated for on-call surveying services, accounts noted. 7C2A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with the Grasso Companies, LLC for Project PM 2021-1 Pavement Management Program for an amount not to exceed $3,008,196.40, accounts noted. 7C2B, authorize the Chief of Operations and Public Works to execute orders on contract with the Grasso Companies, LLC for Project PM 2021-1 Pavement Management Program for an amount not to exceed $300,819.64, accounts noted. 7C3, approve the revisions to the City of Norwalk Department of Public Works standard detailed drawings noted as final approved revisions, drawings dated March 2021, approved by Anthony R. Carr, PE, number 28018, CFM, Chief of Operations and Public Works, and Vanessa N. Valadares, PE, 28346, Principal Engineer. 7D, Land Use and Building Management Committee. 7D1A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute a contract with Pinnacle Design Build LLC for Mill Hill Jail and Barn Site Accessibility Alterations, Phase 2 project for a total not to exceed $221,749, account noted, or counts noted, sorry. 7D1B, authorize the Historical Commission to issue change orders on contract for a total not to exceed $23,000. 7D2, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an amendment to the license agreement with Norwalk Seaport Association Incorporated for access to the Hope Dock from North Water Street parking lot to extend the agreement period retroactively from February 1st, 2021 to January 31st, 2022. Item 7D3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Yankee Gas Services Company, DBA Eversource Energy, to provide natural gas service for the Jefferson Elementary School Renovate as New project for a total of $76,276. Funds are available in accounts noted. 7E, Finance and Claims Committee. 7E1, accept and approve the report of the Claims Committee dated April 8th, 2021. 7E2, for informational purposes only, narrative on tax collections dated April 8th, 2021. 7E3, for informational purposes only, monthly tax collectors report dated March 2021. 7E4, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to submit an application to the State of Connecticut Department of Energy Services and Public Protection Division of Energy Management and Homeland Security grant for the Emergency Management Performance Grant, which is approximately $65,000. 7E5, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to submit an application to the State of Connecticut for grant funds provided under the State of Connecticut's Local Capital Improvement Fund for Local Capital Improvement Program, $652,435-2021 entitlement. 7E6, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to approve for the library infrastructure changes, purchase, delivery, and training of the staff for 2 laptop vending kiosks for an amount not to exceed $70,000. Budgeted capital expense account noted. No special appropriation required. 7E7, approval of fiscal year 2021-2022 Parking Authority budget. 7E8, approval of fiscal year 2021-2022 WPCA budget. 7E9, appointment of auditors Clifton Larson Allen LLP, formerly known as Bloom Shapiro, to audit fiscal year 2021 at a fee of $97,000, second year of a 5-year contract. And that's it.
Thank you. All right. We'll take a roll call vote. Councilperson Greg Burnett,
Aye.
Councilperson Dominique Johnson,
Yes.
Councilperson Manny Langella,
Aye.
Nick Sacinelli, aye. Councilperson Barbara Smith,
Yes.
Councilperson David Huvelman,
Aye.
Councilperson Kadeem Roberts,
Aye.
Councilperson Diana Revolus,
Aye.
Councilperson Darlene Young,
Yes.
Councilperson John Kites,
Yes.
Councilperson George Theorides,
Yes.
Councilperson Tom Keegan,
Yes.
Councilperson George Sirenides,
Yes.
Councilperson Tom Livingston,
Yes.
and Councilperson Lisa Shanahan.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sacinelli. Now, I believe the first item off the agenda is item 7B1. Mr. Kites?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that and just briefly speak to it. First, I'd like to thank all the members of the planning committee who spent quite a few hours at the last meeting hearing, having the department heads go through every single item requested. And I think it was helpful, though. I think we got an idea of what's on the horizon and the needs of departments, and got a real insight on what's going on, especially on the specifically to the capital budget side. Real quick, some of the highlights for me. that I would just want to talk about, and some being in the district in which I represent, just some citywide. And first is the East Avenue project, with that funding for the most part going to bring the utilities underground in preparation for the East Avenue street project. That's going to coincide with the bridge. I think there's a lot of improvements that people have been asking for, and it's nice to see that finally get going. Next is the Capbester Beach with the repaving of the lots, which is a significant project in itself for anyone that's been there. I'm assuming everyone in the sound of my voice has, and also the restriping to allow for more resident spots at the beach. That's going to coincide with the repaving of the lots, and also Veterans Park, where we're going to get some new marina docks. The ones that we currently have are in pretty bad shape, and we're overdue for rehaul. So we'll have some new docks going into the Veterans Park, and those are for residents, which is great. And just lastly is the paving budget. I'm glad to see that we've kept that high standard that we've worked up to as far as the paving and sidewalk budgets. We've kept that very flush, and I'm very comfortable with that. And because roads and our sidewalks are very important to everyone throughout Norwalk. And that's the gist of it. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kites. Are any other comments relative to the capital budget? I too would like to thank the Planning Commission and the Planning Committee from the Common Council for their due diligence, and also the department heads who worked hard to put together the things that they need, but also realizing that some things are nice to have, but not right now. They were very good in prioritizing what they need, and I think we reflected what is good for the city and helping the city move forward. So again, thank you. So all in favor of the capital budget as presented? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item off the consent calendar, I believe, is item C7C5, Mr. Sirenides?
I think it's also 7C4, if I'm correct.
Okay, 7C.
Or did we read it on consent?
Oh, okay, 7C4. Yep, okay.
Probably read 4 in the consent.
We did read? Did we
That's
read
what I
it?
thought. Mr. Hooverman, was that read under consent or?
No, 7C4 and 7C5 are off consent.
Okay,
They should be moved now. And you have also 7A3 from Health and Public Safety that was not on consent.
okay, very good. So let's keep on the track with Mr. Sirenides on item 7C4.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move item 7C4. Approve the revisions to the City of Norwalk Department of Public Works roadway standards amended March 2021. These standards are replacing the current standards that go back to 2017. This is yet another example of Norwalk moving forward with the Go Green initiative, looking to safety for both bikers and walkers, and along with motorists. Through the study, we'll try to identify areas that are better off for bikes in a safe way without causing any additional traffic or congestion through the city of Norwalk. With us tonight, we also have Mr. Carr and Mrs. Valderez to answer any questions or speak a little bit more on the items.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, as you mentioned, the roadway standards design manual was last revised in January of 2017. And again, the proposed revision before the mayor and the common council tonight generally stems from us working to accommodate what's known as a complete streets transportation system. And what this means is that it's a multimodal network, which basically means walking, biking, running, vehicular driving, etc. That provides a safe and comfortable passage for people of all ages and abilities within the public. And specifically, these recommended revisions include a minimum travel lane width of 10 feet for major and minor arterial roadways. And just to give a 30-second preface on what that means. So your smallest or lowest road classification with the least amount of cars is generally a local road. Local roads feed collector roads feed arterial roads, and arterial roads generally feed highways like expressways and freeways. So that's the bulk of it. So arterial roads carry a lot of traffic. So what we've incorporated into our standard revisions, or excuse me, our standards, roadway standards, was that for any proposed lane widths less than 11 feet, so 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, et cetera, would require traffic engineering analysis to demonstrate adequate safety and capacity within the proposed travel lane. And this is in accordance with the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, also known as AASHTO's Green Book, or their Holy Grail, which is also known as a policy on geometric design for highways. So it's a federal standard. It's been around a very, very long time. But again, they've also been updating their standards too, to incorporate the newer design elements, such as bike lanes, other traffic calming scenarios like raised crosswalks. So obviously, as standards change and practices change, the codes should also change with them. So that's what's before you tonight. And we look forward to incorporating the new complete streets, or some people call it Vision Zero, other people call it, there's a lot of different names, but complete streets is the total package for a streetscape that allows motorists and pedestrians to function in a very safe and comfortable environment.
Mr. Livingston.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just want to commend Mr. Carr and his staff for doing this. I think it's really important. It's an important step in increasing walkability throughout the city, which I think is a really important goal that we all have. And I know the mayor shares. He's recently opened up some new bike lanes, or proposed new bike lanes. I mean, in addition to creating space for the bike lanes and sidewalks, this also has the benefit of potentially slowing traffic on some of these roads as the lanes get narrower and roads and the traffic does slow. So I think it's a win-win all around, and I do appreciate the hard work they put into it and certainly support it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of approving item 7C4, please raise your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, Mr. Serenides, item 7C5.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7C5, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all necessary gap documents to Walk Bridge Program 0301-0515 project, including the PAL enclosed with this agenda, whereby the city of Norwalk will transfer funds in the amount of $3,750,000 on May 30th, 2021, $1,875,000 on July 1st, 2022, and $1,875,000 on July 1st, 2023. To fund the undergrounding of utility lines on East Avenue from Fort Point Street to Olmsted Place to be performed by Connecticut DOT accounts noted. Before I pass this along to Mr. Carr and Ms. Valdez, I just want to say we're pulling this off consent today to help clarify some confusion that was in the hour this morning. The article read really well, but the title was a little misleading. These funds are not going directly to the Walk Bridge project or anything associated with the Walk Bridge project. These funds are going towards a program that we were trying to get passed in East Norwalk for a very long time, dealing with those overhead power lines. Like I said, now we have Mr. Carr and Ms. Valdez, who put on a lot of work on this project, many hours, and they can explain this with better detail and answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll give a brief overview to hopefully simplify and make sense too of what was in the paper today. Like Mr. Chairman said, the article in the body was correct, but the title just needed a little bit more clarification. So just by way of background, as part of what you hear, the AUP, that's the Advanced Utilities Project. ConnDOT is undergrounding utilities on East Avenue from Winfield Street to Fort Point Street. And the reason why this work is required is because it precedes their project, ConnDOT's project, for replacement of the New Haven Line Railroad Bridge over East Avenue, also known as the East Avenue Bridge Replacement. So over the course of time, which predates myself, Norfolk was able to begin discussions and finally able to incorporate and negotiate some city and municipal work be incorporated into CONDOT's AUP, or the Advanced Utilities Project, which includes undergrounding our utilities on East Avenue from Fort Point to Olmsted Place. Now, again, that's outside of CONDOT's scope. So CONDOT came in with a linear project going from point A to point B. We decided we wanted to be part of the project and extend the limits of their project from point B to point C. But obviously, CONDOT's not going to pay for that. The city has to pay for their portion, also known as the muni, or the municipal portion, which is outlined in this PAL. So the city did successfully negotiate terms and conditions of the PAL, which is short for Project Authorization Letter, which is tied to what's called a master agreement that requires the city to reimburse CONDOT for the cost of the construction and any inspection services for the negotiated portion of the municipal work. So it's basically, the way the state's looking at it is that this is out of scope work for them, and we're just basically joining in on their project. They're going to oversee it, they're going to administer it, they're going to inspect it. We basically just have to support, versus if we went out to bid on our own, we would own the project from design, bid, and build. So the benefit, again, is that this will allow DOT to administer construction for the municipal undergrounding. So they're going to worry about all the coordination with the utilities and the scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we'd be more in a support capacity, assisting them throughout the way. And lastly, this is important because completing the municipal portion or the city portion of the project now concurrently with their project, it sets up a scenario to only have traffic congestion or interruption one time, versus if they completed their project from point A to point B, we waited, let's say several years, number of years, X amount of time passes, and then we rebid out the same project, the same work now that's incorporated as part of their AUP on our portion. Well, then you're going to have the same traffic disruptions, the same flow, the same congestion again. So we're trying to eliminate the problem twice and going to just one time. And obviously there's a benefit of not having staff prepare the bid documents, nor having to retain a consultant to prepare the design, nor having a consultant to have to administer the construction oversight and the testing and all the other different services. So there's a lot of mutually exclusive benefits, but again, the city is also paying our portion in 3 installments as agreed upon in the PAL, which is not something that the state has done. The first installment is due, I think, May 30th of $3.75 million. And then the subsequent 2 installments are installed on July 1st, 1.875 in 2022 and 2022, and then July 1st, 2023. Again, that's not something the state has done. So it took a lot of work to get there, but what this does is this fosters a collaboration and a partnership with the state. And I think that it sets both parties up for success in the future with both of the projects if we're working and swimming towards the same goal versus doing it 2 separate times and running into more issues. So the staff is very comfortable with the estimated cost. Myself and the city engineer or principal engineer thoroughly reviewed it. We have a lot of experience in roadway construction. We've also vetted it with our internal consultants and obviously worked on it with CONDOT. So we're very happy and we're very comfortable with the terms and provisions of the PAL. And again, that's what's before you, is recommending this approval for the $7.5 million, again, for the city's portion that we requested to be extended into CONDOT's project.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Any questions or other comments? Well, thank you, Mr. Carr and Mr. Sirenides, for clearing that up. Anybody just reading the headline might have a misunderstanding of the actual situation and the fact that this is city work being done by CONDOT, that if we didn't do it this way, might cost us perhaps twice as much. So again, thank you for clearing that up. So having said that, all in favor of the item? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Oh, Mayor, and also just one last thing. I'd like to thank Vanessa for her hard work during this whole ordeal and negotiations with the state. CONDOT's involvement with the city has again long predated my tenure here, and I have to say she's done a terrific job. One staff member could spend all their time just administering these CONDOT projects, because this is not the only CONDOT project that's in the city. We have other projects going on. We have future projects pending, and Vanessa seems to do it all. And she makes it look very easy. So Vanessa, thank you very much for your support. Definitely couldn't do without you. And you're definitely a valuable asset to the city, and especially to the Department of Public Works. So thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, so that should bring us back to item 7A3, Mr. Sacchinelli, and I apologize for missing that.
I would have gotten you back there eventually. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to read the item and then speak briefly and update the backup. This is authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a memorandum of agreement between the state of Connecticut, DSPP, DEMIS, and the city of Norwalk regarding the FEMA mobile vaccination unit. This is an expansion of our capability to vaccinate into the community, expanding into South Norwalk. Brief update to the backup. It does reference a date of March 29th and a 30-day window. This has already been extended an additional 30 days into May. And we do have Deanna and Michelle both on the line if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sacchinelli. Do we have any questions for the members of the Health Department or any comments? Mr. Hoovelman.
I just want to give just to say thank you to the Health Department for their hard work throughout all of this. And also, I think this is just another tool in the arsenal that we have to continue to get the vaccine into our community and to move ourselves forward through this pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. Hoovelman. Any further comments or discussion or questions? Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Young.
So which vaccine were we giving on the mobile unit?
Ms. Diamore?
The original plan from the state was to do Johnson & Johnson. They've since shifted. Right now, today, they were in New Britain, I believe, and I believe they administered Pfizer instead. So there'll be more updates, announcements to come in the next, we'll know more in the future, but they did use Pfizer today.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? Ms. Revoluth? You're muted, I think. Okay.
I think you guys already will know what I'm going to state, so you'll understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not because I don't see your plight or what's being done. It's just because I believe that health should be equated to additional things, nutrition, and other outlooks. So I don't want to discredit your movements and your work and what you're doing. I know it's wholehearted, but I just want you to understand that my plight is sincere and strong, and I'm going to stay with it. Talk to our families and our communities about nutrition.
Thank you, Ms. Revoluth. Any further discussion? Okay, and again, I would like to thank the Health Department too, for doing a remarkable job. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Ms. Revoluth abstains, and the others all in favor. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item, I believe, 7D, 4A and B. Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the items and speak to them. Item 4A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Kessler Booz Associates to provide architectural design services for the new Norwalk High School project for a total not to exceed $5,954,083, account noted. And 4B, authorized to establish a contingency for additional services as may be required for a total not to exceed $297,704, account noted. This is the next step in the new Norwalk High School project. Kessler Booz was selected based upon an extensive RFQ process. The selection committee included representatives from the Board of Education, the board itself, as well as the administration and the principals, as well as representatives of the city. And from the council, we had Ms. Smith and Mr. Kites also on that Castle Booze was the low bidder and has extensive experience in designing schools in Connecticut and in the neighborhood states. They also have experience building schools on sites of existing schools while the schools are occupied and active, which is going to be really important for this project. Alan Lowe is, I believe, is in attendance if there are any questions. But otherwise, I move this and support this item.
Okay, Mr. Livingston has moved the project. Any questions or comments? Mr. Keegan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I cannot support any appropriations for this project for the same reasons that I've expressed in the past. Most of them are financial. I believe that at the end of the day, we're going to be unpleasantly surprised at how expensive this project becomes. I do listen to our CFO, Mr. Dakowitz, and he's expressed some warning signals and things in our committee meetings, and they mean quite a bit to me. So I'd also like to talk about an effort that we have currently concerning equity for all of our citizens. And when we talk about equity, we talk about fairness, the importance of being fair. And I think that we must remind ourselves that the elementary school in South Norwalk was closed in the 70s. So that was 40 plus years ago. And I believe all of our efforts to build new schools should include them. And I think an elementary school in South Norwalk should be our priority. And I cannot support a new Norwalk High School because less than 18 months ago, we didn't know we needed it and we didn't know we wanted it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. Any further comment or discussion? Any questions for Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank you, Tom, for that sentiment because you've really put that into perspective for me particularly. There is a need for a school in South Norwalk, and it's long overdue. So I just appreciate you acknowledging that, and I hope that it isn't one or the other, that we can move forward with a plan that is equitable for South Norwalk children. So I appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Any further comments or discussion? Ms. Revolou?
I just want to further that sentiment of thank you for your thoughts of our community and looking at us as a whole, you know, and I appreciate that because actually both schools will end up impacting those kids either way. But, you know, I appreciate you saying that, and I just wanted to voice those sentiments behind Councilwoman Young.
Thank you. Mr. Livingston?
Yeah, I too support the South Norwalk schools, and I just want to make sure everybody is aware that currently, and Alan can correct my numbers on this, I think we have allocated somewhere in the $70+ million for the renovation of the Columbus School, as well as a new school in South Norwalk. So it's certainly something that has been in the works while. It's taking longer than any of us would have liked. And I'm not here to defend anybody, but I do think it is important and we are all working towards it.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Further discussion? Just before this meeting, several of us on the council in this meeting attended a District B community meeting. And this was a topic of discussion, the School for South Norwalk and Neighborhood School. And it was clear that everybody supported a neighborhood school and that we are going to do everything we can to move it forward as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, there were plans that were in place that turned out not to be feasible, and we had to pretty much start over again. And now the district, the Board of Education, is commissioning a new facility study because the other one was deemed to be outdated. So we need demographic information, but we are working very hard to make sure that we do end up with a South Norwalk school, because having to transport children from one end of town to the other certainly compromises their educational experience and makes it more difficult for them to have a healthy learning environment. During that meeting, and in the past at the Board of Education meeting, I reiterated very seriously that the City of Norwalk, the Common Council, and the Board of Education, we are absolutely committed to move forward with whatever plan is deemed appropriate for a South Norwalk school, and to do so as quickly as possible. The other thing I want to mention is to Mr. Keegan's point, 18 months ago, the new Norwalk High School was not a plan. However, when the state of Connecticut offered to reimburse the city of Norwalk for 80%, instead of the normal 30 or 32%, we felt that it was a good idea, as did people on the council here and the superintendent of schools and the Board of Education at the time, who voted in favor of it. Because that school is also over 50 years old and in need of tremendous repair, and putting new money into the repairs of an old school was deemed not very wise. And one of the commitments we made at the time was that by putting the new Norwalk High School into the budget, it would not delay any of the other projects being worked on or being committed to. And that also has proven true. We're moving forward with, we've already moved forward with the Ponus Ridge. We're now moving forward with Jefferson. We're moving forward with design for Cranberry. And we are working diligently to try to have one or perhaps even two, preferably two, neighborhood schools in the South Norwalk area. So again, just so everybody feels comfortable, we are committed to building those schools and doing so as quickly as possible with a design that the community determines is the appropriate design. We need to bring them into the discussion, not telling them what they need, but asking them what they want. So again, are there any further questions or comments or discussion? Seeing none, I'm sorry.
I got my hand up again, Mayor.
Yes, I see it.
Sorry. I just want to say thank you for that, because we were at that meeting, and that was the beginning of a discussion. It was the beginning. And we need to have more, but we don't need to beat a dead horse either, but we need to move this process along. But so thank you.
Total agreement. Thank you very much. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions. I believe I saw one in opposition, Mr. Keegan. If I missed anybody, please correct me. So it was all in favor except Mr. Keegan, who was opposed. Thank you very much. Let's see. Now we go. Got a little bit of a mess here.
D5, I believe.
I believe we're in D5.
Okay, thank you. Yes. D5? Did you say D5?
Yes, D5.
Okay, 7D5, Mr. Livingston. I think you were going to recuse yourself on this one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, D5 relates to the Rowayton Historical Society, of which my wife is president. So I am going to recuse myself. She is here to answer any questions, and she'll get me after you're done. Thank you.
So thank you. I think Mr. Sacchinelli is going to move this forward, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sacchinelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all documents with the State of Department of Economics and Community Development and act as the authorized representative of the City of Norwalk for the purpose of accepting and transferring funds to Rowayton Historical Society in an amount not to exceed $37,000. I'd like to move the item, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Mr. Sacchinelli. Please note that Mr. Livingston has recused himself and has left the building. So any discussion or comment? Hi, Wendell.
Hello, Mayor, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you? Seeing none, all in favor of this item? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us, Wendell.
Thank you very much. I look forward to welcoming you all there, whenever that is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now the next item on the agenda is 7E10. Am I correct, Mr.
That
Burnett?
is correct.
Thank you. Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item is actually not an item for vote. It is a review the summary fiscal year 2021-2022 tentative approved operating budget adopted by the Board of Estimate and Taxation, BET, on April 5th, 2021, along with the associated mill rates by taxing districts. The BET's net appropriation is below the cap estimated by the Common Council on February 23rd, 2021. So we are currently approaching the final phase of the 2021-2022 operating budget cycle, which the BET tentatively approved on April 5th. The BET recommendation is currently $15.8 million below the Common Council cap set on February 23rd. This is largely in part to the $12.9 million of additional revenue from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. This information was provided after the cap was set in February. The next step will be for the BET to approve the final fiscal year operated on May 3rd and the associated tax bills in each of the taxing districts. The current budget provides for a zero tax increase year to year for Norwalk taxpayers. This is obviously a welcomed assistance during the difficult economic times and impact of the COVID pandemic. However, the infusion of the American Rescue Plan funding will not appear each and every fiscal year, so we must move forward with caution and beginning to extrapolate our operating expenditures and revenue posture 2 and 3 years ahead. And I would say that also includes looking at the Board of Education's operating budget. We have the opportunity to make this a manageable situation for Norwalk taxpayers, and we have to commit to making it happen. The Finance Committee of the Common Council and the Finance Committee of the Board of Education have agreed to begin to hold joint meetings each quarter, beginning in June, to start short-term and long-term financial plans and objectives. Our Chief Financial Officer, Henry Dakowitz, will take us through further details related to the tentative approved operating budget. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll yield back the remaining of my time to our Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Mr. Dakowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Thank you, council members. The American Rescue Recovery Act is granting both the city and the Board of Education tens of millions of dollars. At the direction of the mayor and followed through with the Board of Estimate and Taxation, it was determined that the increases to the fiscal year 2022 budget versus the current fiscal year 21 budget would be funded by those funds. And thereby our net tax levy would be flat, and we would come in with a no tax increase. One of the strict requirements of this act is that no government body is allowed to reduce taxes. it was desired by Congress to not use these funds to lower tax rates. However, coming in flat is acceptable. And at the mayor's direction, it was felt that this would be the fairest way to benefit the most citizens and taxpayers by just reducing taxes across the board. So we're coming in with a zero tax increase. It's a little bit plus and minus by district, just because of the way we calculate things. But overall for the city, it will be coming in flat. So originally, there was an increase of about $15 million in expenditures. And there was also an increase of $4 million for the Board of Education. So it was determined that the city's increase would be funded by the monies we will be getting from the American Recovery Act. And the Board of Ed would use the funds that they're getting, which total $27.5 million, to fund the increases that they were given when the cap was set. There are restrictions on the funds that come in. However, if funds can be used for those restricted purposes that were going to be funded, then that allows those funds to then be moved and migrated to pay for the things that encompass that increase. As Mr. Burnett indicated, I've had discussions with Tom Hamilton, the CFO of the Board of Ed, and there's a real concern about a cliff, that if these funds are used in the next year or 2 years budgets, the funds are coming in over a 2-year period, but it's a calendar year, not our fiscal year. So it may span 2 of our fiscal years. And the concept was, well, if we take this extra funding source and use it to pay for expenses this year, this coming year in 22, and possibly 23, then in the subsequent year, fiscal year 24, we're going to have a much bigger cliff, and we're going to need a much bigger increase. And I think the meetings between the finance committees that Mr. Burnett referred to, as well as the results of the efficiency study that is upcoming, should help us identify areas of savings and efficiencies so that that cliff is not as severe as it might appear. So hopefully this is a one-time benefit, and we appreciate President Biden and the Congress in allocating these funds to us. We're going to use them to keep taxes flat this year, and at the same time, focus on our operating expenditures such that we can find savings that help offset the reduction in this funding source in the next 2 years. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dakowitz. Do we have any questions for Mr. Dakowitz? Or do we have any comments relative to this item? Seeing none, Mr. Livingston, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just, if I could, just want, Henry, if we could just talk a little more about the type of restrictions on these funds. And you mentioned there's some that you don't think they're going to really be significant in terms of how you're planning to use the money. Is that correct?
Well, on the city side, there were 2 major restrictions. One, that a government entity, a government body should not use these funds to cut taxes. The second is that these funds should not be used for pension plans or OPEB funds, which pay for post-retirement health costs for a jurisdiction. So that was the negotiation between the Democrats and the Republicans at the big scale. Those are the restrictions on the city side. Tom Hamilton has explained that there are restrictions on the funds that are going to the schools, and he might be able to elaborate, but I still say money is money. There are large budgets involved. And even though restrictions may occur with some funds, it doesn't mean that there are no funds available to provide for that gap. But I'll let Tom explain the restrictions because he's more familiar with them on the school side.
Good evening. I'm adjusting my camera, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Yeah, thank you, Henry, for offering me the opportunity to jump in here. Couple of points that I would make. One, with respect to the funding under the American Rescue Act, we really still do not have definitive guidance from the state of Connecticut. All we have is the actual bill that that Congress had passed, but it's unclear what restrictions, if any, the state of Connecticut is going to impose. We do know that the restrictions the state imposed or that were imposed on the earlier CARES Act funding and the ESSER funding basically, did set some parameters on how the funds could be used, and said that the funds had to be used for essentially meeting COVID-related expenses. We do expect that the new round of funding may have some similar types of restrictions, or they may be more flexible. Some indication that they may be more flexible. There are going to be some requirements. It looks like that at least 20% of the funds will need to be spent to address learning loss that students may have experienced as a result of the pandemic. Now, how we define that, we're going to have to see. As Henry said, the funds that do come in, we may be able to apply some creative processes. For instance, we may be able to take a certain percentage of our elementary school teacher salaries and suggest that that is being used to address learning loss. So I don't fundamentally disagree with Henry's assessment that the funds probably can be used to cover what would really be a normal, ordinary increase in our operating budget. But I do want to, suggest two things. One is we know that the intent of these funds was that they were to be used and they were appropriated for the purpose of addressing some of the extraordinary expenses that we are facing as a result of COVID. So we know that our students have, had a very difficult year. And we know that in many cases they've fallen behind. We know that in many cases some of those students have become disengaged and need to be re-engaged. We know that some of these students have suffered social and emotional kinds of traumas that will require additional services. So really our first preference would be to use those funds for those additional needs that our students are facing. So I do want to put that on the record. And then from a financial standpoint, as Henry mentioned, we are very concerned about the cliff. And I've run some numbers, I've run some projections, and it depends, on what your assumptions are. But if you assume that the city next year indicates that we should have a 0% increase in the local budget for the following year and use these federal funds to cover that increase. But if our underlying budget increases at 4% or 4.5% next year, we end up at the end of a 2-year period. So in other words, going into the third year, we end up in a situation where we would be looking at an increase of about 13 or 13.3% at the end of a 2-year period. So going into the third year, and it equates to something on the order of, I believe, about a $27 million increase that we would be looking at. So that is a big concern of ours. And, we will certainly be expressing that and talking about that. I'm glad to hear there's agreements for a quarterly joint finance committee meetings of the board finance committee and the Common Council Finance Committee. So certainly we can share that information and engage in that discussion going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you, Mr. Dakowitz. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, this was actually a review, not an actual.
Oh, that's right. That's correct. There is no vote on this. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Now, do I have another motion? Ms. Young. She beat you, Lisa, Ms. Shanahan.
My goal tonight was to beat Lisa Shanahan at that, so. What?
I think it was a split second. So what is the
Split
motion?
second. Motion to adjourn.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? I didn't think so. Abstentions? Mr. Keegan abstains. Motion to adjourn passes. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night.